Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's really a great place to be in Minnesota this morning. It's good that the 2016 American Wind Energy announcements of their market report is going to be forthcoming. First, I want to recognize the people that are standing beside me and behind me as part of the 4,000 Minnesotans who are working in the wind industry. Ranging everything from construction to the development, the utilities, technicians. We cover a great spectrum of employment here in Minnesota, and we're very proud to be taking a part in that. My name is Doug Fredrickson. I'm a vice president with Blattner Energy. We're a family-owned company. Minnesota, 110 years. Right in central Minnesota. Wind industry has played an extremely important portion in our success, especially these last 20 years. I would share with you again that another important Minnesota company, M.A. Mortensen, also benefited tremendously, I think, from Minnesota's position in the wind industry. Minnesota's position in the wind industry for these past 2 decades has been instrumental in the industry making the steps that they have. So for that reason, AWEA selecting Minnesota to take this time to announce what last year's results were are especially gratifying. Minnesota deserves this recognition. Joining me today are going to be distinguished leaders from the American Wind Energy Association, from Vestas, and from Xcel Energy. It's first my pleasure to introduce Tom Kiernan. He is CEO for American Wind Energy AWEA Association, and he'll talk about our results and the information and the accomplishments that we had for 2016. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Doug. Thank you very much, Doug. It's great to be here. Actually, it's an honor to be here in the state capitol and joining all of you. It's also an honor to be here with the leaders of the industry, the wind industry. And I want to just highlight, again, Doug Fredrickson with Blattner. Blattner is the #1 engineering construction firm in the wind industry nationally. You'll hear also from Ben Fowke, the CEO of Xcel. They're the #1 utility in the country with the most amount of wind on their system. And then you're also going to hear from Chris Brown, president of Vestas Americas. They're the #1 in 2016, the #1 producer of turbines throughout the United States. So you truly do have here this morning the leaders of the wind industry in America. And there's a reason they're here, because Minnesota is a leader, and we want to talk about that. I also want to thank the men and women joining us here this morning. Up here, one of the key stories or themes from our 2016 annual market study, the jobs growth in this industry, the high quality, well-paying jobs, and the growth of jobs in the wind industry that these men and women are a part of. Let me start, if I can, just talking a little bit about the results in the upper Midwest, so Minnesota, Iowa, and the Dakotas. In 2016, wind costs were down, productivity up, and jobs growth in the upper Midwest. A couple of examples were now, at the end of 2016, around 18,000 jobs. We grew up to 18,000 jobs in the upper Midwest in the wind industry. We have $28 billion invested in those communities in the upper Midwest in the wind industry, and we now produce 26% of all the electricity in the upper Midwest. And that number will be growing. One way of telling it's growing, when you look back over the last 5 years, the new additions to the grid, so the new electricity that's added to the grid in the last 5 years, 80% of that was wind over the last 5 years. So there's been a lot of wind added to the grid, and it's going to keep coming for the benefit of consumers. And I know Ben's going to talk about this, but wind is affordable, very affordable, reliable. Consumers are benefiting, and jobs in the economic development, especially in rural America and the rural part of the upper Midwest, and I'll talk about that some more, but significant benefits in rural America. Talking a little bit about Minnesota in particular, we now power just shy of 1 million homes with wind energy in Minnesota, 20 factories. You want to talk about manufacturing and strengthening the manufacturing base here in North America. We have 20 factories just in Minnesota, and we've got now 4,000 workers in the state. And that too will be growing. I'm sure Ben's going to talk about the growth of wind energy that they have planned for Minnesota. Other examples of the strength, the economic vitality of the industry, Doug Fredrickson mentioned Blattner, his company. They now have 2,800 employees in the renewable energy industry, spanning 10 states, but headquartered here in Minnesota. Similarly, Mortenson, they've got, I think, 1,600 employees in the renewable industry. So the upper Midwest is a leader throughout the country, and I'll talk about nationally in a minute, or actually let me jump to it now. So with the upper Midwest and with Minnesota playing this leadership role, let me share with you what happened in 2016 nationally. We started 2016 with about 88,000 jobs in the wind industry. We added over 14,000 jobs. In 1 year, over 14,000 jobs were hired in the wind industry. We now have over 100,000 men and women working in this industry. Within that, we added 4,000 more manufacturing jobs. So we now have 25,000 men and women in manufacturing facilities throughout the country. That is a 16.5% growth year over year in the hiring of wind industry jobs. Now you compare that to the national average for other industries that are hiring. We are hiring at a 9 times faster rate than the average industry in the country. So for every job another industry hires, which is great, we're hiring 9 jobs here in the wind industry. Now, what's fueling that? Why is that happening? For a couple of reasons. One, this was the second year in a row we had over 8,000 megawatts of new wind added to the grid. It's about 8,200 megawatts in 2016. In 2015, we also had more than 8,000 megawatts. So a couple of successive and successful years have gotten us to 82,000 megawatts in total throughout the United States, deployed about 52,000 turbines, which make us this year the #1 renewable energy supplier throughout the entire country, having passed the capacity of hydroelectric. So we're now #1, and that is very much fueling the hiring throughout this industry. We also, for the second year in a row, invested $14 billion throughout the country in wind industry. Now, why all this growth and hence the hiring? A couple different reasons. One, the industry itself is extraordinarily innovative and creative. We're a young industry, and we're still figuring out how to enhance the productivity of the wind turbines. You compare the average productivity in an individual turbine in 2016 to just 2009, they're 50% more productive. 50% more electricity is produced per turbine in 2016 than back in 2009. And that's one of the reasons why our levelized cost of energy has dropped to 1/3 of what it was in 2009. So the industry is innovating, getting even more efficient and effective. That's one reason why all the growth. Secondly, the production tax credit. We, the wind industry, called on Congress. We wanted to tax reform ourselves. We wanted to phase down the production tax credit, and there was agreement at the end of 2015 to do that. That gave us a 5-year clarity, certainty on that policy, which was hugely important, and we've supported that. So the industry has tax reformed ourselves. We are calling on all sources of energy to tax reform themselves or figure out a way to level the playing field, because frankly, we have started that whole process. The third reason why the industry is so vibrant and successful, state policies. And I just want to commend, again, here in Minnesota, you've set out a number of policies, including, I think, the 10-year anniversary now of your RPS, which is great, and some other helpful, productive policies that encourage the wind industry to come here. And the wind here in Minnesota, you've got a great resource. You've got a lot of strong, steady wind here in Minnesota that, frankly, you're taking advantage of, and that's a good thing. Let me close with just a couple of thoughts. First, rural America. 99%, perhaps obviously, but 99% of all wind farms are in rural America. We are investing in communities that are often economically challenged. The wind industry provides $245 million a year to the farmers and ranchers on whose property we were leasing the land for the wind turbines. I've talked to any number of farmers and ranchers that are saying that land lease payment is enabling them to keep that family farm or ranch in the family. It is a drought-resistant cash crop for them. So rural America is very much benefiting by the wind industry. I also want to talk just a second, one of my closing points about growth. Navigant Consulting came out with a report recently that projects currently at 100,000, we'll be at 147,000 jobs if this momentum continues by 2020. So this stage is going to be even more crowded in a couple of years, and we applaud that and we're excited by it. So in summary, I would just say wind works for America. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Doug.
Thank you, Tom. I will now introduce Chris Brown, president of Vestas, again, the largest OEM manufacturing of new megawatts in 2016.
Thanks, Doug. It's like Tom was saying, it's an honor to be here in Minnesota. Ben, obviously we've done some work before. Tom and the rest of the AWEA staff worked really hard to produce this 2016 report. But I'm also honored to be here with three of our employees. Brad Halpert is one of the site managers. He's celebrated 10 years with Vestas this July. He came to industry after working in construction and now leads a team of about 8 in terms of guaranteeing profitable operations. Also, Chris Marsh and Will Osborne, they're also here representing some of Vestas' 1,500 wind turbine technicians. One thing that people fail to mention, I think, is that Chris joined, again, Vestas last year after serving 11 years in the Army as a Black Hawk mechanic. He talked to me a little bit before about maybe it's not as exciting as Black Hawk mechanic, but he certainly is a little bit more relaxed than that aviation, but we're really proud to have him. Will has been climbing turbines for also 6 years, I guess it is, Will?
Yes.
And so he attended a wind technician program in Riverland Community College here in Minnesota before joining Vestas, but he served also 12 years in the Marines. One of the things that we forget about is that wind turbine technicians are actually the fastest growing employment sector in the U.S., and we're proud to have vets serving with us. He's traveled the country in Maine and Oklahoma before settling down. I guess you're a Minnesotan?
Yes.
Okay. He's at Black Oak, but I'm glad you guys could join us as well. These guys are part of our booming workforce, 102,000 employees across 50 states. That's a kind of a number that people kind of forget about in terms of, we think that it's wind is a small industry, but it's getting to be quite the employer. A workforce also that I'm proud to say, at Vestas, we're hiring veterans at a 50% higher rate than any other category. They know how to get it done. So in a year where overall U.S. job growth grew at a sluggish 1.8%, as Tom was saying, we grew at about 16.5%. And that's not a fluke. We did it in 2015 as well, and we'll continue to do it. As president of the largest turbine manufacturer, I personally saw the growth rate at Vestas. We grew 13% last year. Today, more than ever, we hear the call from the president to bring American jobs back. We also hear the call to revitalize the failing U.S. manufacturing base. And we hear the call to recommit the engines of our economy to the benefit of the American worker, which we're doing. So the U.S. wind industry, as Tom had indicated, we're answering that call, and we're answering it today, not tomorrow. Of course, over the course of a lifetime, one of the things that we don't think about is how many jobs are created. One turbine, and again, I'll slow down here a little bit, one turbine creates 44 jobs. So just think about that for a minute. Like, we think about, okay, these guys are the only guys, but there's construction, there's manufacturing, there's utility, there's supply chain, 44 jobs for one turbine. 80% of those jobs are in blue collar, manufacturing, operations, transportation, supply chain. And it's really U.S. manufacturing, which we're bringing back, that is building America's industrial base again. Some 25% of the jobs are in supply chain. 25,000 manufacturing jobs across 5,000 factories. That's a hell of a number. And a lot of it's in things like steel. In 2016, the overall manufacturing lost 44,000 jobs, and we gained quite a number. So again, it's something to think about. We also spend. I mean, last year we alone spent $1.3 billion, over $50 million here in Minnesota alone. So it's not an insubstantial investor as well. And that's money spent in U.S. communities, support building kind of shipping, and all across the wind and related manufacturing. It's a major economic growth factor. And I guess what we're thinking about from Tom's perspective and the AWEA folks is that the story and the pages of the report are clear. The U.S. industry is a major driver of economic growth in all 50 states, not just here in Minnesota. And the underlying business reality is the cost of wind has really come down, as Tom and the team has mentioned, especially here in the Midwest. So for us, wind is a no-brainer. I think it's important. Utilities like Xcel, who've long been a leader in wind, are aggressively seeking to add more wind. Xcel Energy, with Ben at its helm, is one of our industry champions. We talked about it a little bit in the hallways. It's Ben that coined some of the best phrases. One of them was, wind is on sale, let's back the truck up and buy more. I think they've nailed that strategy pretty well. The other one that's actually been quite true, and I think the street has realized it, is it's a steel for fuel strategy. Again, we have to slow down a little bit because we're putting steel in the ground to produce energy. It's a renewable resource. And so steel for fuel strategy has been proven that wind's not only economic, but it's also good for business. So thanks, Ben. Also, he's not here today, but he's a true leader for Xcel, Chris Clark. He's had kind of serious results of getting that steel on the ground, so we want to thank Chris Clark as well. Again, Minnesota ranks 7th, both in installed wind power and overall wind capacity, and I know that number will grow. Today, wind power is 102,000 jobs. By 2020, it's expected to be 248,000 jobs. Again, 248,000 jobs by 2020, so we're not a small industry. Development and investment, wind doesn't conflict with the economy, it drives its growth. Connecting more Americans to cheap wind power will strengthen the nation's all-the-above energy independence, deliver billions of dollars to the American communities, and most of all, it will deliver more wind-powered American jobs. Thanks very much. Doug?
Thank you, Chris. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ben Fowke, CEO of Xcel. Of course, in Minnesota, we're all very familiar. Their supply for Midwestern states, Western states is phenomenal. Certainly below a national leader in the wind. Thank you, Ben.
Well, thanks, Doug, and thanks, Chris, and thanks for taking the lines I was going to use in my remarks. But it truly is great to be here today, and I can't think of a better place to make these announcements right here in the state capitol, where in addition to taking advantage of our already green offering, our standard offering, they signed up for Renewable Connect Government, which allows a portion of their load that we serve to be 100% renewable. So we're excited about that. And we're really pleased that once again, we're the #1 wind provider in the country. It's an honor that we've held since 2005. And it's been quite a journey, and we've had a lot of help getting to where we are today. 2 employees here represent the great employees we have with the can-do attitude that can make it happen. I see our regulators, I see our legislators, I see business, and of course the community's always here. Without your support and help, we wouldn't have got here. So where are we? Today, 19% of our energy comes from the wind, all right? And that has been a big part, in addition to some other decisions we've made, in reducing our carbon emissions, again, since 2005, by 30%. So we're really excited about that. We're proud of that. But I got to tell you, we're not satisfied with that. We're going to do more. And I think Chris mentioned it. Over the last month, we made a series of announcements, excuse me, in our 8 states, where we're going to add 11 wind farms totaling 3,400 megawatts of wind. All right, and that's going to allow us to go from 19% of our wind to 35% of our energy coming from wind by 2021. It'll also be a big reason why our carbon emissions will go and decrease from 30% where they are today to decreasing to 45% reduction by 2021. And I have to tell you, I think it also sets the platform going forward where we can reduce carbon emissions by 60% or more. Now, a lot of that wind, almost half of it, will be added here in the upper Midwest. I think Chris and Tom did a great job talking about the economic development that communities receive from that. But let me tell you the thing that really excites me about these wind additions. The fuel of tomorrow literally is on sale today. The technological improvements that we've seen over the last 10 years in wind have been nothing but phenomenal. You combine that with our ability to integrate the wind, our willingness to refigure our generation portfolio to support that wind, and the federal tax incentives that are available for us, our customers, and you have a unique opportunity to bring wind on that is cheaper as an energy source than fossil alternatives, both natural gas and coal. And we estimate that our customers in our 8-state region, with a lot of them right here in Minnesota, are going to save billions of dollars over traditional fuel sources. So that's a really exciting story. It's, I think, a model for the nation that if you have the right policy framework, the right support, and the right goal alignment, you can deeply decarbonize and do so and keep rates flat. In fact, this is going to help us keep our rates affordable and not sacrifice reliability. I think we all have a bright energy future, and we're happy to be part of it, and thank you for your support. Doug?
Thank you, Ben. I know that, I hope wind has been beneficial to Xcel. But I know Xcel has been beneficial to wind, locally and nationally. I have one more item that I'm going to read a letter. Representative Emmer could not be here, but first I want to recognize the policymakers who are here. And Representative Waginas, Representative Gunther, Representative Thiessen, Representative Hortman, and Senator Weber. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to come listen to this. Policy, as Ben has indicated, policy is extremely important. If you would, it's a very, very short letter that Representative Emmer has written. Representative Emmer happens to be Blattner's district representative as well. I was delighted to learn that the American Wind Energy Association decided to release their 2016 annual report to Minnesota. I am sorry I'm unable to join you in person for the event today. Wind power is a critical component of an all-of-the-above energy approach focused on reducing consumer cost, furthering advances in renewable technologies, and moving our country closer to total energy independence. With 20 factories supplying wind industry and enough turbines power nearly 1 million homes with all-American energy, it's exciting to see the state of Minnesota lead the charge when it comes to wind power development. In fact, over 17% of the energy provided in the state came from wind power in 2016. Minnesota continues to rank in the top 10 for installed wind capacity and number of wind turbines. These advances in wind power development, turbine technology are due to the innovative and strategic actions of Minnesota-based companies like Blattner Energy, Mortenson Construction, Xcel Energy, and among others. In particular, Blattner Energy, which is headquartered in my district, continues to push the envelope when it comes to power generation construction. Blattner's important work supports many well-paying jobs and plays an important role in shaping a more sustainable energy future for our country. As a representative for Minnesota's 6th Congressional District and for the many wind industry workers gathered at the event today, I am committed to sharing your story with my colleagues in Washington. I will continue to support policies that further a comprehensive approach to improve our country's energy outlook and ensure that American wind production remains a key component of that strategy. Thank you for your work and continued dedication to the 6th District. We can now move to questions and answers. I would ask that the reporters please address their questions specifically if they can. Indicate who you are and exactly who you'd maybe want to address your question.
Don Davis with Forum News Service. This is probably for Xcel. What is the magic please? What is the maximum percentage you can realistically get from wind power, given the fact that it doesn't always blow and you need to have some other types of power?
Yeah, that's a really great question, by the way, and I can tell you 10 years ago I would have had a different answer for you. We've learned a lot about how much wind we can integrate on the system. The one point you made, though, the point about it doesn't always blow, we know that. And so when we plan our system, we know that we're going to have backup capacity. But when we run the economics that I'm so proud of and I talked to you about, I look at wind as a fuel. So I might have to have that natural gas plant on the ready. But if I'm not firing up with natural gas and instead I'm letting wind, which is more economical, do its work, then everybody benefits. Now, we are studying just how much renewables, both wind and solar and other forms, you can have on your system. But I'm pleased to tell you, the more we learn about it, the more we develop I think the world's most sophisticated software, the more we invest in our grid, I think the more renewables we can put on our system and not sacrifice reliability. We like to say that most of our customers, we're in 8 states, a lot of different opinions in those 8 states. Most of our customers want a cleaner energy product. All of them want an affordable, reliable product. It's not inconsistent with what we're doing.
You don't have a percentage at this point of what percentage of wind power
Well, you start to run into, it starts to get kind of technical. I have no issue at all with 35% of our energy coming from wind. I think you can start doing more than that, but some of the backup, and we call it ancillary costs, do increase. But when you're looking at the price points that we're bringing wind on now, you've got room to do more.
I got a question for you, Ben. Tim Blotz from Fox 9 here in town. The president famously, about a month ago, signed the executive order kind of rolling back some of the Obama administration rules on coal, trying to refire up that industry. You seem to be going in a completely opposite direction. Is fossils dead in your mind?
Oh, I don't think fossil is dead, but the economics of renewables, and particularly here with wind, are economically compelling. You know, I mentioned that we announced wind farms in all of our 8 states. Some of that is Texas, and I can tell you in Texas it's about the economics much more than the environmental aspects. So what we're doing is taking this pragmatic approach. We know our customers want a cleaner product. We also know they want affordability and reliability. With the right framework and the right goals and the opportunities like have been presented for us with wind coupled with the federal incentives, the economics speak for themselves.
Yeah, but what would change those economics? Ever? You know, I mean, would fossil fuels ever get cheaper than they are today?
Well, you know, one thing I've learned in my time in the industry is never say never. Things do change, but you're right. You know, 10 years ago, natural gas was more like $8, $9, and today it's $3 to $2. Could it get less? Well, that technology keeps improving too, so I wouldn't say never, but it can't get lower than 0, and we're getting close to that now. So I think renewables have a very bright future. I think it's the reason why we can phase out of some of the incentives, because the technology is improving at a pace that will compete head-on without incentives.
Mike Hewlett from the Star Tribune. Well, yeah, when those are gone by 2020, the tax incentives at that point, I mean, will we be competitive with natural gas and coal or not?
Well, so I think it was Tom, if not Chris, that talked about a 50% improvement since 2009. That's not going to change. And so let me just, I'll turn it over to you, but I do know, this is why we've been so aggressive and, you know, as Chris said, Xcel backing up the truck, because the fuel of tomorrow is on sale today. I think it'll take a little time for the technology to catch up, but I'm confident before I turn it over to Chris that it will. But that's why we're acting today, to lock these prices in.
I mean, if you look at, if you look at on-grid If you look at on-grid prices, you know, of where fuel is, or where wind is, you know, in a lot of jurisdictions, we're in that 1.5, 1.6 cents a kilowatt hour with the incentives. Now, when it goes away, you're still at $30 a megawatt hour, or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And in terms of prices where they need to be on post the PTC, the industry knows that. I mean, the question is, are we going to play at a level playing field, or the other industries, is gas and some of the other incentive industries that also receive tax incentives going to have a level playing field? But again, we're not afraid to compete. Let's just compete on a level playing field as we go. And so, from our perspective, the wind industry will be here. We'll have to compete with solar. We'll have to compete with natural gas, and you know, bring it.
John Cohen from Care TV, and this might be a Vestas question, I don't know, but the early criticism of wind was that a lot of the components were imported from Europe. Is that changing? Is that game changing at all?
Well, it's, you know, I'm happy to report we have over 5,000 employees here in the U.S., and we're, you know, everything that Ben and the others are getting are from U.S. manufacturing. Yes, we have some components in terms of different sizes of machines, but I think we're still the largest. For our company, we're the largest U.S. job manufacturer of any of them, and the reliability is increasingly going up, and as well as we have a local manufacturing base. So Colorado, we have you know, a number of manufacturers, but we have over 1,500 techs as well. So it's a U.S. made, U.S. manufactured story.
Chris, are there still good places, lots of good places to put wind turbines?
Minnesota.
That was I mean, are we ever going to run out of room?
So no, I mean, if you start to think about, I mean, when you think about kind of, you know, look, renewable energy and other energy, let's use the most economic source where it is. You know, you are blessed in this state with great natural resources of wind. You're blessed in the Northwest with great natural resources of wind. Are we running out? You know, no. I mean, we have plenty of spots. Now, do we have transmission access? Do we need regulatory situations that utilities get rate recovery? Sure we do. But, you know, in the long run, there's plenty of space left to develop great wind farms. Let's not put wind where it shouldn't be. Let's not put it in places that are crowded. Let's not put it in situations where of avian, but there's plenty of good wind left. And I think the folks at AWEA will be able to tell you that, you know, we're not constrained for sites.
Yeah, I might add to what Chris said, too. Keep in mind with these huge technological improvements we've seen, wind farms that were built 10 years ago, there's opportunity to get a lot more wind out of the existing sites, which already in many cases have the transmission, which can be a bottleneck to getting things done.
And if anybody wants to climb a wind turbine, see these guys here, they can surely train you to jump up in one. I'm a little bit overweight, but if you want to, please talk to us. Yeah.
How many wind turbines do we have now in the state of Minnesota, and how much is that projected to grow in the next year, the next 5 years? Any idea?
Well, we have, across our 8 states, I think we have about 6,400 megawatts of wind, and that's how we look at it. I would say in the upper Midwest, about half of it, well, maybe a little less than half of that, say 3,000 roughly, is located here. And we're going to add a little over 1,500 megawatts over the next 5 years in the upper Midwest. It'll be in Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. We're an integrated system here in the Midwest. And that's just Xcel Energy speaking. So it's pretty significant. And I think the key is in the rural areas, you put them on the farms, and farmers can continue to farm the land. So it is, as Tom mentioned, it's an additional revenue stream for our farmers.
If I can
Yeah.
also add one, put that in a national context. As I mentioned, we've been over 8,000 megawatts deployed in each of the last 2 years. We now have 18,000 megawatts either under construction or in advanced stages of development. My point being, the momentum we've seen in the last 2 years, we expect to be in a similar ballpark the next several years. So per Ben's point, the momentum and the development we're seeing here in the upper Midwest, we would expect to very much continue.
Tom, why are the wind turbines 50% more efficient than they were before? Who wants
You
to?
might-
I know it's a little technical, but
No, it's not. I mean, I think if you look, wind is related to the size of the blades and the productivity of the machines. The larger blade you can make, the more wind you can capture. So 2 times the space is 3 times the energy production in simple terms. But also things like the digitalization of technology. We're able to have more reliability. You know, there was a question earlier about grid reliability. We're upping that. So capacity factors, the kind of how much you produce per size is increasing. And it's just getting cheaper. We do somewhere between 3 and 4% annual levelized cost of energy reduction, but you also get an annual energy increase or production the larger the machines get.
Minnesota has been in the your top 10 for several years, but it doesn't really, it kind of stays at roughly the same area. I mean, at this point, does that indicate that we're sort of like a more mature area for wind? I mean, the growth seems to be, well, you mentioned Texas and stuff like that. I mean, is most of the build out or the majority of it kind of done here and now it's just sort of incremental or not?
Oh, it's not going to be incremental. I mean, I'll let Tom speak to that. We're going to almost increase our wind ownership here by, as I mentioned, over 1,500 megawatts. That's really significant. And we're not the only ones looking at wind. So I think you're going to see a lot of wind in the upper Midwest. I mean, the fact of the matter is Texas is a lot bigger landmass than Minnesota. Tom,
And
I
I
don't know.
will, let me put this context out there. The reality is states and regions compete for the economic investment. Developers are wind project developers, wind farm developers are looking for where's good wind resource. Obviously in Minnesota you've got it, but is there an environment where we've got some good transmission and some good policies that encourage it, et cetera, et cetera. So states are competing going forward. So it's far from a done deal. So I do think there's a lot of momentum in the wind industry. We are hiring and developing, and those states that are saying, hey, bring it on, bring more of it, are going to see more wind energy, and frankly, their consumers are going to benefit by more affordable electricity. There's a study, and John Hensley's in the back, he can help me with this. I'll get it approximately right. The 10 states with the most amount of wind energy, their electric costs are dramatically lower than the 10 states with the least amount of wind energy. And John will get the facts exactly accurate on that, but the point is consumers benefit by enhanced development of wind in these states.
I think the other part about that is, you look at Buffalo Ridge, obviously that's a great wind resource, and when we talk about renewables, it doesn't go away. So what you have to also start thinking about is repowering. You may have technology that's 15 or 20 years old that is maybe not as productive. So that, again, Minnesota is blessed with a great natural resource that I think Ben and his company and others are taking advantage of. So you should be thinking about how to even get more resource out of the natural resource that you have.
Yeah, one of the things I want to add to that, Mike, is back in the early 2000s, we started thinking about 2020, and, you know, we're basically an engineering company, so we called it CapEx 2020, a real pithy name. But we knew that the region needed transmission. Transmission not only to increase the grid's reliability, but also to bring these wonderful resources from the rural areas of the country to the load centers. And those projects are just now getting completed. And that's what it's allowed this additional wind to be brought on the system at such an affordable price.
One other question on the job thing. Minnesota, you mentioned 4,000 jobs in Minnesota. So are those jobs, and you mentioned that they cover a lot of different, but what are they primarily? I mean, we're not really much for manufacturing, right? I know we have a few, but I mean, what are the majority or those jobs? What type?
I mean, they're essentially they're across the supply chain, right? I mean, you do actually do a fair amount of manufacturing in terms of parts that go into a large steel unit. You have a lot of fabrication, you have a lot of mechanized parts. You also have manufacturing. You have, you know, different, obviously Doug and the team from Blattner and Mortensen are here. But I think you have a fair amount of subcomponent parts that we buy across that chain, over $50 million.
You also have, you mentioned earlier, the wind turbine technician, and I'll just share a very brief anecdote. These wind farms, once they're built, obviously quite expensive, they need to be maintained for the next 20, 30 years beyond. And I was with some of the wind techs in Washington, D.C., and I was talking about the jobs, and one of them corrected me, no, don't think about this as a job. This is a career, because this wind farm is going to be here for 30 years. It's not going to go through boom bust. I'm not going to get laid off in 5 years because the wind farm's going away. Wind farm's not going away. It's going to be maintained. And this person was saying, I'm building a family, I'm buying a house based on this career maintaining this wind farm. So that was an important shift for those men and women.
Site man, how long? How many years?
10 years.
I don't know. How old? Sorry, I shouldn't ask how old, but.
36.
I'm 55. I mean,